Oh my gosh, do I have a story for you guys? So, I wrote about this story once in my autobiography, but looking back on it, I'm starting to realize that it was far more dangerous and frightening than I really wanted to believe it was in the moment. It was actually my ex husband. I had gone to work one day and decided that he and I needed to not have a relationship anymore. He had started to become kind of violent. I didn't want to deal with that. Nobody should have to deal with that. So I left him. I had a friend of mine take me in for a couple of days. I slept on their couch and I had just kind of disappeared. He went crazy. He went absolutely nuts. First of all, he was a stunt man in the movie industry. So he's a little loopy in the first place, right? He was also 5'1". So there was a little bit of Napoleonic syndrome going on there where he wanted to be, the big man, but really he was a chihuahua, that little dog with a big bark. But then he proved that you don't have to talk loud to be heard. I went to lunch with the friend of mine that had taken me in. And he was somebody that I had known for many years and I'd always had some kind of a friendship with. We don't anymore, but that's another story for another day. Also, a stalker story. My ex husband showed up at my office right after I had left. He went up to the office and we went inside. I wasn't there, I had just left, but the office administrator was there. He saw her and he asked where I was. And she said, well, she's not here right now. And he pulled a single red rose out from behind his back. And he looked around this room. He looked at all the cubicles. And he spotted one with some familiar looking stuff on it. And he looked at her and he said, is this where she sits? The office administrator was completely freaked out by this. She looked at him and she said, yeah. And I got all of this from her secondhand afterward. She was literally shaking as she was telling me this. And he walked over very slowly to my desk. And this man picked up my keyboard, my computer keyboard, and slowly ran his fingers across the keys. He laid the single red rose down in front of the keyboard. And then he looked at the office administrator and said, please tell her I was here. And then he turned around and walked out. I think a lot of people believe that the story ends there, but it really doesn't. This man had taken the day off of work to do this. He went downstairs to the front security desk. He never should have been allowed up the elevators in the first place. But he went down to the security desk and he asked, is this entrance the only way into the building? Security guard made the mistake of answering him, yes, it is. He sat there on a bench near the front door and he waited for me to get back. And now, this building, the entire lower floor, other than where the elevators were, was see through. It was all glass all the way around the building. It was a really pretty building. It was right next to the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. It was gorgeous. I had a great view. I could look down and see the tar pits from where I was. It was great. But he sat there and watched out of the glass, waiting for me to show up. I had been dropped off around the corner and was coming back from lunch, walking in 3.5-inch high heels. For men, I know you don't understand this, but it's hard enough to walk in them, but don't expect us to run. Most of us. I know Bryce Dallas Howard can get away with it. Not so much me until that day. He spotted me coming from quite a distance off. And he got up and he walked out of the front door of that building. He was heading straight for me. I'm 5'6". Remember, he's 5'1", so I'm already taller than he is. I'm wearing 5.5 or 3.5-inch heels, not 5.5. Good Lord, I'd break my neck. I'm wearing 3.5-inch heels, making me, what is that? 5'9.5", almost 5'10". I'm towering over this little guy. But next to my office building, there are a couple of different restaurants. And I was walking along in front of these restaurants, and he jumped up and ran out of this door right at me. I thought for sure he was going to throw a punch in my face or something. I had no idea what was going on. Scared the daylights out of me. He wasn't supposed to be there at all. This was 2005 or 2006. 2005, I believe. So I had a cell phone, but it wasn't the greatest. And when he was running right at me, all I could think of was, oh crap, here it comes. So I turned around. I spun on my heel and started walking the other direction. And he ran around in front of me and stood in front of me with his hands on his hips, looking very stern. I don't know what he was saying. I have never really known what he said that day. My heart was pounding so hard that that's all I could hear. I spun around on my heels again, started walking the other direction again, starting to panic at this point. And I start saying, help me. Somebody please help me. But since I wasn't screaming, nobody was really paying attention. People were dining in outdoor restaurant areas and nobody's paying attention. And he ran around in front of me again and got in front of me again, hands on his hips, angry, screaming at me. So they started looking at him. And I spun on my heels again, started walking away, and started visually kind of pleading with people as they were walking past. Nobody wanted to get involved. One man actually threw his hands up in the air like, oh, yeah, get away from me. I don't want to get involved. He ran around me multiple times, cutting me off every single time. Finally, I pulled out my phone and I called the person that I just had lunch with. And I said, he's here. I need help. Please come get me. And they thankfully hadn't gotten very far away. And they spun around, came flying back, pulled up to the curb. And just as they were pulling up to the curb, we took off sprinting in these 3.5-inch spike heels. I easily could have fallen and broken my neck, but I didn't. And I ran to, it was a large green Land Rover. I grabbed the passenger handle just as he unlocked the door, threw myself inside the car, dove into the seat, and I didn't even have the door closed when I heard tires squealing and we were taking off around the block. I was so scared I didn't go back to work that day. You see, previous to all of this, he had told me, if you ever leave me, I'll kill us both. Because if I can't have you, nobody can. You belong to me. I had been his possession. My bosses that day called me and told me I needed to go to downtown Los Angeles and file for a restraining order. And I did. About a week and a half later, they fired me anyway. They didn't want that kind of drama in their office. I didn't want that kind of drama in my life. But the fact is that it existed. And the fact that it existed was enough to intimidate and frighten other people. They didn't want one of those workplace atrocities to happen. And I don't blame them for that. But when we know we're in these dangerous situations, we have to learn to ask for the correct help. I did ask for help and I did get out of there. I should have called 911. Somebody else should have called 911. Anybody would have gotten involved. Nobody would. It's a hard thing to come to the realization of you have to stand up for yourself. And you have to recognize these as being dangerous situations. And I've known a lot of women who have been in similar situations have gone back to that man.